does that.
Coffee makes you coffee?
Yeah, it's really weird.
We're doing these Twitter posts and things first.
Yeah, gotta find that link, get it shared.
All right, live.
Okay.
Okay. Chat.
Wait, I'll embed my tweet from earlier, Skeet from earlier, about the results.
Skeet? Oh, that's a Blue Sky tweet.
Yeah.
Doesn't that mean something gross?
I don't know.
I thought that was like a slang word from one of those generations in between mine and now. I thought it was like something sexual or something. I never
like it
learned
may
what
have
it
been
was.
like something in the Chappelle show that I heard at some point. Yeah.
Is that something you just said, or is that something people say?
It's what Blue Skyers use.
Mm. Chet says you guys, or no, Chet says something in Wingdings that says secure the bag. It's not Wingdings. It's like a funny font. Big says you guys don't look ready. This is part of the setup. You guys are here early. Jeez.
Just posting on
Big
Blue
Island
Sky
Chickens is
right
the
now.
full name. It always takes a second to like get the tweets out and stuff. You know, we gotta draw the people in.
Okay, so I shared it as a reply on Blue Sky.
Kudos to people who jumped on immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us so quickly.
Subscribed.
We should have some warm-up comedy for you, standing by to get the audience all prepped.
I know, back in the Twitter days, we had that song or the music, the background music to use.
I've got jokes that I generally write from time to time. I could fill some of the time. Here's one that came recently. Why are men so bad at making tiramisu? Because you need lady fingers.
Oh boy.
For those who don't know, lady fingers is like the cakey bread stuff that you use to make tiramisu.
Yeah.
So let that sink in. I'll hit you later.
Late at night. I'll just wake up cracking up.
Crowd work.
Okay.
Chet wants.
Just shared on Blue Sky and Twitter.
All right. Let me refresh.
All right. Ready to start?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Welcome to the Basic Income Show. I am your host, Scott Santens. My co-hosts here are Conrad Shaw and Josh Worth, where we talk about just the latest around the world of basic income developments and news. And we got some big news to cover today. It actually just came out like today. So pretty exciting to talk about what just happened in Germany. And that's the first thing we'll talk about. We'd usually first go into like an AI theme song thing, and we decided to go ahead and call that quits. So no, not another version of that this week and going forward. So sorry if you missed it.
We ran out of genres. There's no more genres to explore. No, it's just kind of the gag had run its course. Yeah. People are very sensitive about AI. So
yeah, maybe someone out there had their favorite. It would maybe be kind of fun to like poll to see who's who had their favorites. What
Maybe,
was, like, the
maybe
top
some
version?
maybe we'll get some funding for the show somehow, and we'll hire a different musician every single week to rewrite that jingle. That's
Or we'll
that's
just
probably
hire
a few years
somebody
down the
to
road
ru-
before we have that
we'll
kind of.
we'll hire somebody to just run it through the AI. Get our AI
At least someone's got a
operator that we
job,
can
right?
pay. Exactly. Right.
Yeah. All right. So what's the
Okay.
news, Scott?
Breaking news. Wait. Listen. Okay.
All right, I'm
Let's-
excited.
Let's see if this works correctly.
Big Island Chickens misses the song, and he says, "I think it was freaking brilliant." By the way,
That's
Or
right.
to
I'm getting
release
an
the album.
you'll always have episodes 1 to 13 to go back and resample.
getting an error trying to bring this up. That's annoying. So anticlimactic with the music and
I
everything.
know. Jeez.
There's a real benefit to being one of these live stream people, is you get to see the real behind the scenes stuff. Like, this isn't going to make it into the edited version, except I said that now, so maybe Scott will put it in.
Maybe I'll have to share my whole screen instead of doing a window. Maybe it'll work.
Do we need to queue up the song again?
Yeah, just let me know. We got it here. I got like 10 of them.
There we go. There's a screen.
Okay, so can we all read this?
Let's try and see if we can pronounce this word. Bedingungssloses Grundeinkommen. Bedingungsloses.
Yeah, that's,
Okay.
that's
Sounds about
close
right.
enough.
All right.
All right, so I'll just read through this, and then it's broken down into different like groups of results. Okay, so this was run by the Mein Basic Income Group, Mein Grundeinkommen in Germany, and for those who don't know, Mein Grundeinkommen is this group that's been like raffling away 1 year's worth of basic income for like a decade now, with hundreds of people have gotten this, like 1 year at a time. And they decided to do like a big 3-year pilot and with like a control group and everything. And combined with the Research Institute and randomized control trial, all that. So yeah, here's that. In this first long-term study, 122 randomly selected adults, 21 to 40 years old, single-person households, net income 1,100 euros to 2,600 euros during 36 months, monthly 1,200 euros tax-free without obligations. So unconditional, 1,200 euros per month. And, the increase to their income was at least like 33% or so, and at most 50%. So this is kind of looking at like the lower middle class, and also interesting, these were not families, these were single person households. So really just trying to figure out what is the impact on like younger, like prime age working adults without families, but usually
like that-
don't get
like-
anything else.
Like the kind of kids who are just getting out of school or paying their way through school, although this is Germany, so they probably don't have to pay their way through school so much. Or like the equivalent in America would be like, this is when you get your crappy job or take the internship that doesn't pay anything and pay your dues. And this is sort of funding kids through that phase. I guess kids up to 40 years old, but like,
yeah, it was kind of similar too. In like the age range to Sam Altman's pilot, because that was also ages 21 to 40. And in that pilot, again, we can break this down later. We can make those comparisons, but there was some differences in that pilot between like 21 and 30 versus 30 and 40, just so people know. But yeah, so then their comparison group here was 1,580. with similar socioeconomic characteristics who got no basic income. But like the basic income group, they completed a questionnaire every 6 months. So yeah, very large control group. Again, like in the...
Do you know, so that they had nothing? It wasn't like $50 for taking the survey or any of that stuff? It was just voluntary?
Yeah, it looks like it.
That's cool. Doesn't muddy the results as much.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the benefit of having such a large control group too, is you can suffer more of people not filling out the surveys without breaking too much of your findings.
And thank you to those people for doing that.
Yeah.
People who just fill out surveys because they care about data. That's really cool.
And they'll even cover this too later, but they made a point of finding, like, incorporating people who are both like for and against the idea. So it's not like all the people filling out the surveys were for the idea. Like there were some people there who did not like the idea. So maybe they, just as they can like have different info, fill it out differently than the other ones can. I think balances it out.
But I also imagine they're not asking opinion stuff so much. Like what's going on for you right now? How are your finances? How's your health?
Right, in the fall of 2024, the data was analyzed, and on April 9th, 2025, today, the final results were presented publicly. Below is a comprehensive overview of the official research findings with an emphasis on the effects on work, mental health, financial stability, social engagement, and general well-being, including key figures from the study. We then discuss how the findings have been received and summarized in the German media. So I noticed there's already a bunch of articles in Germany about this. The data was embargoed until today, and so there's just a bunch of articles out there today in Germany about this. I expect that probably tomorrow or maybe later today we'll start seeing American media outlets start to pick this up.
Are you seeing like an equivalent of like spin from the left and the right equivalents in Germany of like, see, it didn't work, or yes, it's amazing? And like, are you seeing like what we usually see? Or
I haven't been able to read a bunch of things yet, and certainly I'm not looking at social media for reactions, but the articles are just pretty like standard, not sort of biased, just pointing this stuff out. And I think I've read 3, maybe 4 translations so far. So I wanted to figure out which one would be best to share.
Basically just news, not
the difference between European media versus our media a little bit. Okay, study design. The experiment was set up as a randomized controlled trial. This means that participants are randomly divided to the basic income group or the control group. This allows any difference in outcomes to be causally attributed to receiving the basic income. Both groups had similar demographic compositions, quote, statistical twins, and contained both proponents and opponents of the idea to avoid bias. The participants, out of more than 2 million interested parties, were first selected in a selection procedure. 20,000 suitable candidates, after which the final 122 recipients in 1,580 control participants at random were chosen. So again, this group, Mein Grün Dein Kommen, has been doing these raffles for decades, and they've actually, I think, done a great job of building up interest in Germany for UBI through this. So they've got actually a very large list of people. So then when they went out to find participants for this, they were able to reach all 2 million, of their entire list, and then randomly selected, people.
Yeah, I feel like we benefited in America from spillover from Grün Dein Kommen and the Swiss referendum. Like that kind of helped launch U.S. interest in the unconditional UBI stuff.
Yeah, I think it's kind of similar too to what you experienced with Bootstraps when the word got out of that, and suddenly you had 10,000 emails from people wanting to be part of this thing that we were only going to get around 20 people to be a part of.
Just like a virality, yeah.
Okay, the study deliberately focused on younger middle incomes, 21 to 40, people who are not financially poor and don't really need the extra money. Again, this is Germany too, so they're going to have a stronger safety net. You're already going to be covered in some degree to a better degree than here. And also they've got Kindergeld, for kids. And so there's already other stuff. That's why it made sense too to do this in where there's no coverage. Like, who are these people that don't qualify for anything?
Well, that's one of the things that surprised me about you describing that is a lower middle class. I was like, that in America is like barely surviving stuff. But I guess in the context of a better social safety net and not a ton of student debt and like universalized healthcare, then
Right.
$2,000 a month is a survivable income. Where in the U.S. it's like, okay, I'll maybe get my rent.
Right. So
exciting. I see you're about to scroll to the effect.
Right.
We're standing by waiting.
Building up to this. Yes.
You got to keep the suspense building.
Everybody that got the basic income is now drunk and playing video games.
Right.
Am I right? So they're all like professional or gamers at this point.
If you want to place that bet, you can place that bet, but place those bets soon.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, all participants completed 8 extensive online questionnaires just for the start in June 2021, then every 6 months during the next 3 years, and a final time in November 2024, which was 6 months after the last payment. And then, they've taken all that time since then to study the data. And this just came out. This way, one could monitor both the development during the term and the lingering effects measure. The questionnaires covered various areas of employment situation, financial position, psychological well-being, health, time spent, social relations, and more. Some participants were interviewed in depth in anonymous labor market data linked to track objective changes in work and income. At the end of 2024, the data from the basic income group were compared with those from the control group to statistically significant effects to identify basic income. Results have been extensively analyzed by scientists involved and also incorporated into scientific articles. Below we present the key findings divided by theme. All right, here we go. Effects on employment and labor. Guess what? Labor participation remained the same. The share of the group with a job or active on the labor market remained virtually unchanged, identical to the control group throughout the period. There was no statistically significant difference in unemployment between both groups. No one dropped out of the labor market only because they received the basic income. On average, people worked the same number of hours as before, around 40 hours per week in both groups. The often mentioned scenario of a lazy hammock did not happen. And the researchers point out the much discussed withdrawal into the social hammock did not occur in this experiment. So in the Sam Altman pilot, there's 2 different kinds of working less that we're always looking at, which is, how many people just quit their jobs entirely, and then how many go from, say, 45 hours to 40, or 60 hours to 40, or 40 hours to 20. Like, there's a reduction in hours per week that can happen, and there's also the just quitting entirely that can happen. And this didn't find either of those things.
There's also like how many go from 2 jobs to 1, and then that's
correct. Yeah.
And how many go from 1 crappy job to 1 good job, which wouldn't measure in terms of employment rates, but would really measure in terms of like benefit to society.
Yep. And this gets into that too.
Can we pause for 1 second? Lazy hammock is kind of a fun negative metaphor on the social safety net. Like that's one of their best attempts at like, I guess stigmatizing people with a clever metaphor is like turning the net into a hammock. I just want to appreciate the good metaphor work there by the bad guys. So.
Yeah. And as we like to say too, that the difference between a basic income and welfare is the difference between like a floor and a net. So if people are thinking of this as being like a net, like you can rest in or whatever, it's just very different.
I also like to say a floor is very
It's
important because you can stand on it and build on it and everything. Whereas imagine trying to stand on a net or a hammock or something and you just fall on your ass. You know, it's like
Yeah, or build something on a hammock.
you're sort of
not gonna happen.
immobilized by a hammock and you're like
or
precarious.
trying to sleep on the floor.
You know?
That's no fun either.
Yeah. So it's a good metaphor in a lot of ways.
So there was no reduction of hours, did not reduce the working hours. There was no trend of voluntary, part-time, or self-chosen unemployment. The result is consistent with the recent experiments that saw at most a very small reduction in working hours. And in this German pilot project, even that slight decline was absent. So for those who may be aware or not be aware of the Sam Altman's pilot, that showed that there was a small decrease of about 2% on both unemployment and reduction in working hours. And again, that age group was 21 to 40, but that also covered parents and childless workers. And there were these differences there between between parents and childless workers, and between ages 21 and 30, and between 30 and 40. But in general, we see that this is basically what we always see, is that there's either a very small impact of hours worked or employment, or there's no impact, or there's a slight increase. Like in general, over all of these, it's always like that.
Well, also it's like generally, or maybe always, like it's arguable that the decrease in work that is found, if it's found, is good. Like it's new parents spending time with their kids, or young people like going back to school, like the sorts of people we don't want to have all their time sucked up by work. You know, they're preparing to be able to do more work later. You know.
Yep. And so the next thing is more career mobility. It is striking that the basic income group, more dynamics on the labor market, showed significantly more recipients change jobs over the course of 3 years in the control group. So this speaks to better jobs, especially in the first 1.5 years. The difference was big. Many participants with basic income dared to get another job, and often involved an internal change of the same employer or an improvement in the position. This indicates that financial security is important to people to take risks that they might otherwise avoid. For example, career change, pursuing a more suitable job. Although the self-reported risk appetite personality trait did not increase, this behavior does indicate increased willingness to seize new opportunities. So it's interesting, in the first like half of this pilot, it seems that there was a lot more mobility, where people were like, oh, like I'm going to go now that I have this floor, and I'm going to seek this other job. But on the other side of it too is those who didn't change jobs, even they actually liked their jobs more, because they, became voluntary. And this is into this next, but we've spoken about that before, where, just making something voluntary can make something, can lead to better happiness, because that you can leave.
Because you get to choose it. It's empowering.
Yeah.
And that's what we see in a lot of pilots and in bootstraps, like people getting better jobs, people liking their work more. It just makes sense.
Yeah, and it would it's especially relevant when it comes to thinking about AI disruption and like the changes in the job market just in general, like that this a basic income can kind of like make that mobility easier, even when it's like forced mobility. Like you if you're like just trying to adapt to changing times, like having that little cushion seems like it's helpful.
I imagine it might be somewhat of a, so one of the things that muddies this between the US and Germany is Germany has universal healthcare. And in the US, we're basically, our healthcare is one of the things that chains us to a job. Like you need a job because of your healthcare. So the effect,
you could have more mobility here. Yeah.
So more mobility, like here, cash would give you more mobility, but you'd still have that sort of leash to your healthcare to some degree, right? Where Germany doesn't have that at all. It's like now there's really nothing keeping you, if you have enough money to make the choice, there's really nothing making you need that job, and then you can decide what job you want.
Right. Yeah. That it truly makes jobs more voluntary when you have both basic income and universal healthcare versus only universal basic income or only universal healthcare.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Right. These are the foundations of like, can you choose to live your life the way you want it?
Okay, so here's the next is educational finding. There's more education development. The added security enabled participants to invest in themselves. More people with a basic income opted for further training or study than in the comparison group. For example, relatively more basic income recipients took up further education or university studies during the project. This suggests that basic income gives people the space to improve their skills or even change career direction without fear of a loss of income. Again, we see this over and over again, where if there's even people reducing their employment or hours worked, it's because that they're going to reskill, go to school, whatever, or it's because that they are a new parent with a kid, kind of treating it as paternity leave or maternity leave, parental leave. And so in this study, because there were only single adults being tested, then you're not going to see that kind of impact. You could see people going back to school, seeking more education, and reducing the hours. And what's interesting here is that they did both. They actually increased their education without reducing their hours.
Yeah. And then, I mean, another thing to point out that we've pointed out before is that this demographic, this is a very relevant statistic for that. And if you like did another pilot where it was people who were 50 to 70 and you were trying to measure how many people went back to school, you'd probably be disappointed. You know, there wouldn't be that many people, and rightly so. Like UBI means something different at different stages in your life.
Yeah, it's totally fair for people to look at this experiment and say, oh, well, you know, you would see different impacts on those if you did over age 40. And yeah, that's true. But also there could even be even more positive impacts in that group in certain ways as well.
But I would expect in this group, we would see something like the Altman pilot where they would, like, a big spin item was like more debt. People had more debt after, and it's because they took on more debt because they had enough room to, you know, get a new car or put money into school. Like they had the ability to risk, and that's what you do at a younger age, to like invest in yourself. Whereas an older demographic is less likely to take on debt and more likely to pay down debt, you know?
Yeah, and this does get into, this did look at like debt and savings and stuff, so we'll get into that later. But if anyone listening wants to take their guesses as to what happened, then go ahead and take your guesses now.
Also, Tiago in the chat wants to know if we're going to get any results on mental health or reciprocity.
Yes, those are in here later. Okay, so next thing, higher job satisfaction. Within approximately 1.5 years, a clear difference in work experience became visible. Participants with basic income were significantly more satisfied with their work life than the control group. This applied to both people who changed jobs and those who continue to do the same work. Apparently, knowing that one can stand on one's own 2 feet financially leads to more relaxation and autonomy at work, which increases satisfaction. This ties in with the core idea. Those who do not have to work out of fear ultimately work better and with more satisfaction. Income satisfaction. Logically, people with basic income were much more satisfied with their income situation. People without, like, of course, you know, they're going to be happy because they have more money. This difference was consistent and statistically significant throughout the study period. Well, this may seem obvious. After all, they had an extra 1,200 euros per month. It is important because it shows the basic income is a real noticeable financial improvement. The extra money was felt. This confirms that the intervention works as intended, namely increasing financial space. So there are people who would say 1,200 per month, that's too low. You know, you're not going to feel anything with 1,200 per month. It's got to be, you know, 3,000 or 4,000. Like, there are people out there who believe that you wouldn't feel really anything different with that, but that's not true. Like, of course you feel.
I mean, it's sort of absurd too to think of it in the context of you work a 40-hour job, 40 hours a week job, right? And you're making, say you make $40 an hour. So let's see, what is that, like $1,600 a week? You're getting another few $100s. That's like a 20 to 30% raise. Is anyone gonna be working their job and get a 20 to 30% raise and say that's not gonna do anything? No, you get a 20 to 30% raise, you're ecstatic. You're like, that's gonna make a big difference on the kind of stuff I can do, how much I'm saving up, and how much, of my income my rent represents, and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and also there's a difference too, where even if we know and we can imagine getting a $1,200 per month raise, we know there's definitely a difference between your job paying you more and having $1,200 per month independently of your job. Like there's definitely a difference there, and that difference isn't appreciated, I think, by a lot of people when they first hear about basic income, or they haven't given it much thought, or they just think of it as being like this more money, and they're
Right.
like, oh, more money. That's of course that they like that, but it's like there's a big difference between just a boost and this totally independent, unconditional floor that is always going to be there, because that means you can leave that job, you can seek another job, you feel more secure, you're less worried, it's voluntary because you feel that you're choosing to do that. Like there's a big difference between just a raise and like a fully unconditional floor.
Yeah, and that's the second level mental leap. First is like when people say it's not that much money, it's like, yeah, it is.
Right.
It's like a $12,000 raise, but it's not even like a raise. It's like this is money that is just yours. It's like a trust fund, So of course it's significant.
So here at the end of this section about employment effects, in short, receiving a basic income did not lead to a decrease in labor participation or commitment. No one got lazy or stopped working. Instead, people gave up their careers, took a positive turn. They're more likely to quit for a better job, were more willing to change jobs, spent time in education, felt more comfortable within their jobs. The stereotype that free money makes people apathetic is clearly disproved by this data. It's debunked.
We saw a lot of this in this more expected way, where people left a dead-end job to get a better job. We also saw it when people were in a shitty situation. I'm not going to get too much into spoilers. You can wait for the docuseries, but people were in a shitty situation and they would have had to take a shitty job and just abandon their career, like the thing that they went to school for and put all their time and everything in for financial need. And this allowed them to take what is effectively like an internship or like a part-time job or like a paying your dues sort of job that could level up in the career and their passion and the thing they'd studied for. And in the longer term, it led towards greater career fulfillment and greater income. Like it led to a better job down the line, not having to take something as immediately.
All right, next up, here we are, the effects on mental health and well-being. Mental health and general well-being of the participants are important outcome measures in the study. Financial insecurity can cause stress and psychological complaints. The hypothesis was that a guaranteed income would reduce the stress and increase well-being. The results strongly support this. Basic income significantly improved mental health and well-being. They felt happier, calmer, and healthier than the control group. Here's some highlights. There was higher happiness and meaning in life. People with basic income reported a higher life satisfaction and a stronger sense of purpose in life throughout the entire term. The difference with the control group was statistically significant in all measurements. And even 6 months after the last payment, their satisfaction remained significantly higher. To illustrate the magnitude of this effect, the researchers note basic income increased life satisfaction to about the same extent as the effect of getting married in the first year after marriage. In other words, the happiness gain from basic income is comparable to a major positive life event like marriage.
Well, this is all new agey and frivolous, like happiness. Who cares about that? Give me like GDP,
Right.
I want to know how much the stock market moved. That's how I measure success.
I hadn't seen that comparison before too, so I like that. It's memorable to compare it to like that,
yeah,
like kind of
very
that high
tangible.
of being married in the first year. Okay, yeah, there's less stress, better mental health, significant decrease in perceived stress. They felt less tense about daily affairs. The stress reduction was accompanied by improvements in mental health, anxiety, depressive feelings, etc. decreased, and even physical health. The basic income participants slept better and reported higher satisfaction with their health than the control group. Researchers speak of a strong positive effect on mental health through basic income. This improvement was constant and without diminishing effect during the 3 years. No habituation occurred that would cause happiness to drop again. And it suggests that the welfare effect is durable at least within the 3-year time horizon. There was more time and better work-life balance. Although the basic income group does not reduce their working hours, they still experience more free time. A significant proportion of recipients indicated that they felt like they had more time in their day. This is remarkable because objectively the working hours remained the same. This is probably because less financial pressure provides a relaxer sense of time. People do not have to worry constantly or rush to do other chores to make ends meet. In concrete terms, it turns out that people with a basic income, on average, spent almost 4 hours more per week on social contacts and leisure activities in the control group. That one I think is especially fascinating, that like they didn't work less and yet they felt like they could spend 4 hours more per week with like friends and family and like doing fun stuff like out with people, which of course makes a big difference.
Well, yeah, it's about the quality of your time. When you're working, I use the example of when I was a bartender, and nothing against bartending. It was a good job that paid me through some stuff, but it wasn't what I wanted to be doing at the time, and I was doing it out of necessity. And so there's this mental calculus of like, okay, the first 6 hours of my 8-hour shift, I'm pouring these beers so that I can pay my rent and stay indoors and feed myself and come back another day to pour these beers. It's circular. You feel like that time is being lost or taken. Whereas if you're there voluntarily, like the rent is basically covered. Now I'm pouring these beers to invest in my short film, or to save up, or to like get a car. Or so now you're spending your time. You're actively part of it. It's not just like that chunk of the day is like lost to the economy rather than given towards, your life. It's very psychologically important. And one of the things that's interesting to me is that this thing you said above about the mental health being remarkably stable, the effects, is that sort of disagrees with at least how the spin was on, I think, the Sam Altman pilot, where they were saying like there was a boost in mental health, and then after a year or two, it went away. What's your take on that? Like, I couldn't tell like really what was going on with the data there myself.
I think part of the difference is that Sam Altman's pilot was more impacted by the pandemic, and so I think that's one of the things. And I think that maybe there's other factors too, with the German safety net and stuff. But I think the main thing was about like the timing of it with COVID.
Yeah.
And I think like here too, if you're the Sam Altman pilot again focused on they had a lot of families too, there were kids involved, and compared to a group that doesn't have any kids and they're just single adults, maybe there's just like, if you have kids, then the pilot's going to be ending in another year, and so then you start really worrying, or like, oh crap, like what am I going to do? I've got to worry about how am I going to take care of my family? And so maybe there's that added pressure in this environment where that there's no safety net for your kids here in the US. That's so you're just more likely to be stressed out.
One way to phrase that is that the different variable is kids or no kids, and so having kids erodes happiness, just inevitably. Is that a fair take on the data there?
Well, we know that like the number one factor in determining if you're going to live in poverty or not is if you have kids or not. Like that is the biggest thing that causes people to live under the poverty line, to fall under that line, is actually having a kid, because we don't have anything for that. We do like the least of any country. And again, in Germany, there's programs like they have a child allowance called Kindergeld. So that is basically what we used to have for 6 months in 2021 with the child tax credit. They always have that. So they actually invest in their kids and reduce child poverty, and we don't here.
So you saying that the number one factor is whether or not you have a kid? That's a specifically American
yeah,
thing?
It's very American. Yeah.
How does that? Because I read something recently again about that old the number one determinant of success based on money or whatever is your zip code. So those seem like they're basically saying the same thing with different variables. I mean, they're both like high up there. It seems like there's a combination of, what sort of wealth and privilege you came from and opportunities, combined with like trying to have kids in a system that makes it hard to dig out no matter what, but now you've got more mouths to feed.
Yeah, and if you have kids and you really have got to make sure that you're spending less money, and then so you're maybe more likely to be geographically immobile because you just can't afford to go outside of the area. You have to look for whatever's cheapest, and so that can help.
That hits close to home because Dea and Dea is my wife. For everyone watching, I mean, we have these big projects that required a lot of financial risk and that we took on ourselves, and we basically put off having kids for like years, to the point where then it became much more difficult to have kids because we didn't want to like walk away from our work and our projects and then be resentful of a kid, and we didn't want to try to raise a kid and be so stressed and strapped that this kid had a shitty experience. So then we sort of aged out of the demographic where it was easy to have children, and then it became much more expensive and much more inaccessible. And there's a lot of people where it's like, there's still like outlets for people to have kids, but they're very expensive and they're not covered through health care. And like most people, it's basically like, yeah, you're out of luck,
Yeah.
Like so we as a society poor or don't have them at all, have kids young and poor or just don't ever have them. And then you're always trying to claw out.
Yeah. And also in the US too, then even we have programs like SNAP that, mostly goes to kids, and we've got other programs like TANF and stuff that only goes to families with kids. And so even like we have stuff that does try to only care about kids to the little degree that we do, but then it also functions more as that net because we have these high phase out marginal tax rates, so that if you're receiving $1,000 per month in these benefits, then it won't make any sense to like increase your income because you'll lose it, and you've got to make sure that you're taking care of your family. So it's like even when we try to help, we do it in like the wrong way, so that we kind of make people stuck there.
But the CTC seems like its impact was much better because of its unconditionality, because of its mostly universality. Like it was a very high threshold before you weren't getting it, and they could have done it better. But like as it was an enormous upgrade from the other programs that we have that are trying to target children.
Yeah, and it had a very low phase out rate. So, I think it was 5%. So, you for every dollar you earned, you lost $5 instead of like with SNAP for every dollar you like with SNAP for every dollar you earn, you lose 30 cents. Mm-hmm. And so, there's a big difference between a lot of those programs and like the way we properly designed.
Well, and then like the whole idea of the welfare cliffs is like there are points at which for every dollar you earn, you lose more than $1. Like,
yeah. All right. So next up, there's so self-confidence and autonomy. The certainty of a fixed income amount strengthened the sense of autonomy among the participants. They felt freer to make their own decisions without external pressure. This sense of autonomy was consistently higher in the basic income group than in the comparison group throughout the study. Interestingly, the effect was still present 6 months after the last payment. The increased self-confidence and sense of self-control did not disappear immediately after the money stopped, especially with women in the basic income group. They reported a strong increase in autonomy, and women on average are more likely to be economically dependent due to lower wages or care responsibilities, and the basic income reduced that dependency and gave a greater sense of self-worth and freedom of choice.
I think this is a really underappreciated effect, especially in the left. There was research we looked at a little while ago that, in terms of messaging and what people care about, reduction in poverty is much more like a selling point for the left in general, and not as much for people on the right. And it creates these mental things of like we're separating ourselves from those people, and it's a much harder sell. Whereas autonomy and freedom, that's not only very compelling to people on the right wing, it's actually more compelling to people on the left wing than the reduction of poverty. And to me, it's like the bigger thing. Like, as much as getting rid of poverty is important, sort of unleashing human potential and autonomy is the bigger picture thing here that we're trying to do. And it's very short-souled by this sort of paternalistic thinking that we see pretty much everywhere, but especially on the left.
Right. Yeah. So the higher self-determination directly contributed to overall life satisfaction. So again, like just feeling like that more agency means that you're happier, and it's important to be satisfied with your life. And then this leads to life satisfaction too. They felt that the quality of their social relationships improved. They were more satisfied with their friendships and felt more connected to their environment than the control group. This could be partly explained by the fact that, as mentioned, they spent more time with friends and family. Social contacts were no longer limited by lack of money or stress. In addition, the basic income gave some the opportunity to mean something to others, for example, through aid or donations, which increases the sense of social value. And there's more on this later on. As an example, one participant, Dominic Schiffer, described how basic income helped him. At first, it felt like a lottery prize. Later, he saw it as an opportunity. Quote, "It gave me a lot of peace in everyday life and also strengthened my self-confidence." Another, for example, a friend of his dared to start studying at the age of 40 thanks to the basic income, something that would have been much more difficult to achieve without that financial buffer. And both felt less restricted by money and could make life dreams come true, which they would otherwise have postponed. In summary,
there was something you said that made me wonder about hanging out with family more, and like what you said before about like people felt like they had more time in their life, and it sort of came across at that point as like a perception thing. Like you feel like you have more time when it's not getting stolen or whatever, but also there's the reality too that hanging out with friends and family costs money. Like a lot. I remember in my 20s or in college, people are like, "Hey, let's go out," and it's like,
right.
I don't want to ask you to pay for me. I can't afford to do anything. Like I live off Top Ramen, so I actually can't hang out with people because it costs money to do that. And so to a certain degree, how much is that? Just like they have enough financial ability to pay the $10 to like go to the thing,
Yeah, I remember being on the flip side of that when I was younger, when I had friends that like couldn't afford to go out, and I could, and I would be constantly offering like, I don't care, like I will cover everything. I just want to like go out and have fun and hang out with you. But then there was this guilt on their side where they were like, I thank you for the offer, but like, no, I just don't want to like feel that you're always like paying for me. Right. So that's part of it too, is if you have something like this, then you can feel less guilty because you know that you can pay, and that's not a block.
And the money shame starts to melt away. I think this gets back to what Tiago mentioned, wanting to know about reciprocity. Like everyone has this desire to feel like they're doing their part in reciprocity. And that's why there's so much stigma attached to getting like welfare in the way that we know it and to getting covered by your friends. And it actually becomes this very awkward thing, even with people and their parents. And anything to kind of like take the pressure off of that, where people can just show up on their own steam, can have profound psychological impacts, I think.
All right. So before moving on to the next section, to summarize this, the basic income function is a kind of safety net that took away stress, which allowed people to flourish mentally. Mental stability can in turn lead to higher productivity and innovation. And also director of Mind-Grudine Coleman, which may have societal benefits. Next section is effects on financial stability in behavior. An obvious consequence of an additional monthly income is better financial stability. The study examined how participants managed their money. What did they spend it on? How much did they save? And did their financial position change? In addition, they looked at whether a guaranteed income influences financial behavior and values. For example, consumption patterns, savings, debt, generosity, and altruism. The findings reveal an interesting two-phase pattern. First, people fulfilled deferred needs. Then many used the money to build a buffer and help others. So here are the key results. There was a rapid fulfillment of needs in the initial phase. It was just the first few months. There was a clear increase was seen in consumption expenditure, especially to fun experiences like travel and going out. Many participants used the first extra money to finally achieve long cherished wishes that they wanted to fulfill. This is also called a catch-up effect. There was a consumption reservoir that was resolved as soon as they could afford things that had been postponed before. For example, replacing broken household appliances, going to a concert or vacation. One participant indicated that now going to concerts is more carefree. They could go without having to constantly count whether they would make it to the end of the month. At the same time, one remained to deal consciously with the money. It wasn't $1 million jackpot, so people don't throw away money around recklessly. So yeah, just in general, you get this, and people worry, oh, you're just gonna like waste all the money, and people might even like look at that first few months and think, oh, like they're just wasting it on going to concerts and vacations or whatever. But that's like we're all like deferring and delaying. There's things that we want to do but can't afford to do, and then you do those things and they make you happier, and then you go on to like do other things. Like you can focus on those other things. It's not like you're constantly going out and being frivolous or whatever. It's just that there are things that that are important to us that we're deferring in hopes that we can eventually afford it someday. So when you can, you do it.
Is this a three-year pilot?
3 years, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Like one of the things people don't think enough about, I think, is the duration. Because these temporary ones, especially if it's like a year or less, when we were setting up Bootstraps, like people would say, this is, you're going to save yourself a lot of effort in fundraising or whatever if you do it for 1 year and for half as many people and less money. And like one of the things we wanted to get as much of a glimpse of as possible is like these phases. So we imagine like, okay, year 1, stop the bleeding. Like you got to get safe. Year 2, make some moves. Like year or 2 to 4 or something like that. But what happens when you imagine when people are going to have it for life? Like how do the phases progress? Once you make some moves and start investing in yourself, when do they start to pay off? When do you start building prosperity? And all of these pilots that have happened are like in the 6 months to 2 years range generally. So we're only getting a glimpse at the first phases, and where it gets really interesting to me is like, what does it look like over the course of someone's life, especially knowing you're going to have it for the rest of your life? How do you plan? What does it look like passed down between the generations? Like, what if my parents had a basic income? That's one of the reasons I'm really interested, even though it's a very different, world and demographic than us, is in the Give Directly 12-year pilots. Like what does that long-term sort of trend look like in someone's life? Because we watched the evolution of people just over 2.5 years as they built their confidence, got new careers, but it took time. There was like a general trend that went through these phases.
Yeah, it's definitely important to think about the differences in long-term versus 3 years even, but also on the other side of it. Like I've already seen people like look at this and as usual, they say, oh, well, sure, it was good for 3 years, but it clearly wouldn't be good if it was permanent, because then people would have different like negative experiences. That's when this the bad effects would seep in, even though those same people say for sure they're going to see this from a pilot like this, like it doesn't matter. They're always saying it.
I think anyone who's being honest, either for or against, would have to admit that we still don't know, and that we need to be curious about that, right? That's one thing I want to find out next. I have like theories and ideas, but like we don't know what it looks like for a lifetime, and we don't know what it looks like totally universally saturated in an entire economy. Like we've only seen random people picked out. So we should always come at it with like a humility of like, well, what is really going to happen, and be ready to find out.
But I would also say that we still have positive results from longer term stuff, and I think that matters too, because people will ignore those things. Like we have studies from like studies of lifelong lottery winners with who win, like monthly income similar to a basic income. We've got like the Alaska dividend, which has been for over 40 years and with no end. And we've seen like natural experiments, like the one in North Carolina with the casino dividends, which is, lifelong. That's not going anywhere. Right. And like all of those things are still these like positive things. So I just wanted to keep that in mind. I think it's more on your side of things, thinking about how much better they could be over time.
Right.
Versus like thinking, oh, well, they will turn negative when it's over like a permanence.
But also knowing that these are better and longer term glimpses of what we think will happen, but we also don't really know. Like for one example, intergenerationally, like we're always dealing with people that are starting as having grown up in this environment, in this world. What happens like 2 generations down the road where the last person in your family to remember not having a basic income is your grandparent? Like it's just a different world.
Yeah. Okay, so again, going down as far as reactions financially, rising consumption stabilizes. So after that first phase, a habituation effect in consumption, additional expenditure decreased again slightly and normalized over time. Eventually, a spending pattern adjusted to the new income level. People with a comparable total income, so it was like wages plus 1,200 euros, that equivalent income did not consume more than the basic income participants did. This means that there was no sustained consumption explosion. After the catch-up spending was done, participants did not spend more and more, but reached a new equilibrium. The study thus refutes the fear that a basic income would lead to continued irresponsible spending. They also saved and invested more. So from the start of the project, the basic income group began to build consistent financial buffers. The data shows that a large part of the extra money was saved. Over the entire period, more than a third of all basic income amounts received were set aside in savings. On average, recipients saved twice as much as comparable persons without a basic income. Many also saved the money in profitable investments. For example, savings accounts and investments. This behavior indicates foresight. Extra income is used for financial freedom for the future to increase. Part of the acquired financial space was parked for later. So this is, again, what we see kind of repeatedly is, in general, people tend to save more and also pay down debts as a result of this. Like the belief that people just like waste all of this is just shown to be false over and over again. When people see this boost, they just want to save for a rainy day more. And that's not to say that they don't increase their consumption at all, because that's also a common thing. But it stabilizes. It's just like they spend a little bit more because they have more income. So say going out to dinner more often or whatever. But then they're also putting some of that money aside for savings.
I want to answer one of the chat questions real quick, and sure. I don't want to go too deep into this, but it comes up a lot. Dominic Danny says, "How are we combating price fluctuations on UBI? If the state gives me $2,000, the landlord can just raise my rent to $2,000. The same goes for every product or service I buy." And the main thing here is there's an assumption baked into that. Like the only thing we're doing is UBI, and there's no like market regulations. You're describing essentially, Dominic, to me, an extortionary, unfree market. Whereas if we have appropriate regulations like anti-monopoly, things like that, to make sure it's a free and competitive market, then businesses competing for your money in that market are going to be competing to keep their their positive margins, but their cost as low as possible. So the problem with rent in general is that it's a speculated up, finite resource that isn't appropriately regulated enough. And then it's the same thing today. It's like, what stops landlords from taking every single penny we earn, right? We earn more money, they take more money. There's some level of competition and some level of regulation to maintain that competition. And then we'll always need that, or anytime you have cash as the solution, it works where it works best is in a truly free market. So yeah, we'll definitely need whatever combination of things makes housing accessible and affordable and competitive, so we can't be essentially robbed.
I don't want to go into this too much either, but I'll just add as well, since it's a very common question. It's just a very common reflex. People saying, oh, there's no point because rates will just go up. So just a couple other things is when we're talking about universal basic income, we're not saying that you increase the money supply by that amount. You're going to have people with higher incomes that pay more in taxes than they get in basic income. So it's not necessarily monetary inflationary. There's not more money chasing the same amount of goods. They're going to be the same amount of money chasing the same amount of goods, but in different hands. And so that's one part of it. And another part is, one of the impacts we've seen too is that people with basic income in other pilots have shown greater home ownership rates. So that means fewer renters renting, in which case that actually pushes downward pressure on rents. And then there's a difference between cost of living areas. So you're going to see most likely people moving from high cost of living areas to low cost of living areas, which means maybe rents will go up a bit in these lower cost of living areas, and likely rents will go down in these higher cost of living areas. So there's these other impacts. Then of course, you can have something like land value tax. That means that you would see those who own a lot of land having to sell their houses or whatever. And who's going to buy that? It's going to be people that have more buying power. And so you'll have that home ownership again shift downwards. So it matters about the tax regime that you use in regards to results when it comes to stuff like rent and prices. It's just false to say that, oh, it's just going to lead to just rents going up, because it ignores so many variables and factors.
Yeah, the way I think about it is, when you have a different amount of money in different people's hands, you're gonna get a re-equilibration of the market, right? Certain things will cost more, certain things will cost less, and we'll find the new demand. The way that I think of UBI is, this actually allows the demand to be more honest. Like, people can actually vote with their wallets in the way that is not driven by desperation or coercion. So we'd be finding a closer example of what a free market would look like, what the prices should be, rather than what the prices are in sort of this extortive paradigm where people don't have options. So then they have to just take what's on offer and are vulnerable to being taken advantage of.
So part of the question that maybe we didn't get is about the rigidity of maybe he's talking about the rigidity of the amount in the second part of the question there. But I think that is interesting, the idea that maybe the amount of the basic income is somehow adapting to the changes, some other changes in the economy. So yeah, if that's what you're asking, that is a good point. That maybe a rigid amount isn't going to.
Well, yeah, a lot of people assume, that there wouldn't be any increases, and so in a pilot like this, it makes sense to have 1,200 euros per month for 3 years, whereas in Social Security, it's adjusted for inflation with COLA, cost of living adjustments. So, if you really wanted to be realistic, then it would be looking at whatever the inflation rate of Germany is, so that maybe the first year was 1,200 euros, and then the next year was 1,250 euros per month, and the next year was 1,300 euros per month. That's more realistic because you're adjusting it. And a lot of people just assume that it's not going to happen, and it's going to be the minimum wage, and it's going to erode over time. I don't think any basic income would be set up that way, because Social Security isn't set up that way.
I mean, I could see it being screwed up that way, where it's like, okay, it's $1,000 a month, and then 10 years from now, it's the fight for 1,500, and forever and ever. So it's really important to peg it to a moving target. And
Yeah.
what would even be preferable to pegging it to inflation would be pegging it to a prosperity measure like
Right.
GDP or average
GDP
income
per capita.
So I think of it
for
like
what
a
it's
pooled
worth,
house.
that is what we're doing with commingle, is that the amount is directly tied to the income of the group that is also benefiting from it.
Yeah, if the group's making more money, then the basic income's bigger. Like, it's a rising tide effect, and sort of put into the mechanism.
Okay, so when it comes to wealth building, here's another one of the top line that was interesting. So the share participants who had less than 10,000 euros in assets decreased from 27% to 13% during the 3 years. In other words, many people who previously had little buffer managed to build up a savings pot of over 10,000 euros. In the control group, that share remained low, 27% below that threshold. This is a direct indication of increased financial stability. More participants have a nest egg to cover unexpected expenses. There are also indications that some participants with the basic income have paid off their debts, although this is not explicitly quantified in the main results. There was greater financial security. Subjective financial security obviously increased. Participants felt less in need of money and had to live less from paycheck to paycheck. As one of them put it, we no longer had to watch every cent to see if there was enough left at the end of the month. First, they gave themselves a little extra. After that, many people became more aware of how they handled money and built up a buffer. This confirms an important principle. First, there must be financial stability. Only then can we act in solidarity and with a view to the future. And this is interesting too with the solidarity and altruism. A very interesting finding is that people with basic income were more generous and they transferred more to others. They used part of their financial space for the benefit of their environment. The research shows that basic income recipients give more money to others, both through donations to charities and directly to friends and family, compared to the control group. This effect persisted even after the payments ended. Also, after May 2024, the basic income group remained, they donated significantly more than the control group, and the average participant gave 125 per month to others, which is approximately twice as much, which was 60 euros in the comparison group.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated with the potential to measure and see trends in this sort of thing with commingle, because it will be permanent and scalable, and the idea that if there's a rising tide effect, or even from the very beginning when there's a little more financial stability, like how much more are people giving? How much of a virtuous cycle is it where people are more and more excited to help each other the more that they feel supported and safe? So yeah, maybe because we'll be connected to, different forms of payment and tracking what people do and doing surveys and stuff, like, will we find out that more people are giving to, that more people are giving to crowd funds and charities, and more people are excited to invite people into the group, and yeah, that's very interesting to me to start looking at large scale.
Yeah, I think a big impact comes from this increased sense of community and increased solidarity. So I love how they found that here too. Yeah, it led to more solidarity. The increase in prosperity was shared with the community. And the study also looked at whether basic income values and beliefs changed. So in general, deep-seated attitudes, political preferences, risk-taking, work ethic remained fairly stable. Said it doesn't change who people are, but what they do, according to the researchers. An exception was the concept altruism. The basic income group consistently scored higher on the question of how much they consider themselves to be altruistic. This is related to the observed behavior. One actually acted more altruistically, giving more to others without self-interest, and began to see themselves that way. That, I think, is fairly fascinating. It's like you can't give more, until you have enough to give. And then because you have enough to give, then you do. And then that changes the way you think about yourself as far as how giving you are.
Right. And I think it's very intuitive too. It's like I live in New York City, and there's people asking for money, or there's causes to give to, and it's like I got to take care of myself. Maybe once I take care of myself and I know that I'm okay, then I can help other people. I would love to, but it would be irresponsible to do it now, because then I might just end up being someone else who needs to ask for help.
There were no major shifts in personal attitudes. For example, basic income changed a person's tendency to procrastination. It didn't, change that. Qualities such as self-discipline were found to be deeply ingrained and not directly influenced by some extra financial security. So conclusion, recipients use the basic income in sensible and mixed way, first to satisfy long delayed consumer wishes, then to save and support others. The result was a stronger financial position with higher assets and more savings, and at the same time, greater social involvement in the form of generosity. Next up is effects on social involvement and community participation. So under social involvement, we understand both maintaining social contacts, family, friends, participation in community life, and broader social participation, trust in institutions, political involvement. The study found several positive social effects. There was more social interaction. As mentioned earlier, people with a basic income spent on average almost 4 hours more per week on social activities. They met up with friends more often, visited more often, or participated in social events. This increase in social contact was probably because they had more time and money to do social things. After all, a night out or hobby often costs money. Researchers explicitly point out that basic income recipients went out more often, terrace, cinema, joint leisure activities, which is directly related to their higher spending pattern on leisure time. The result is an enrichment of social life. The basic income group rated their social life higher and felt less lonely compared to the control group. They had better relationships. They valued their relationships with others more highly. They were more satisfied with their friendships and family relationships. Financial stress reduction plays a role here. Less arguments about money, more space to do something for others, and so on. In addition, some people... go ahead.
Like on that, the way it reads is like they appreciate their friends more, but I think a big part of it is they feel themselves like they are better friends. Like I'm showing up for my friends. Like I'm not just, it's a very important self-confidence and self-esteem issue for a lot of people.
Right. Just like if you, on the opposite side of things, if you can't afford to go out with your friends, then a result of that can be feeling that you're a bad friend. And that aids in depression. You're like, I'm a bad person because I'm not spending time with my friends, even though the barrier is financial, but also you blame yourself. So this is like the opposite, like the mirror of that, where you're able to afford going out with friends, and then so you think of yourself as a better friend. So some people were even able to work less or work more flexibly. So by going from full-time to a 4-day week if they wanted to, although again, on average, the hours remained the same. Such choices may have improved individual situations, such as more time for children or informal care. This detail is not from the main quantitative analysis, but participant stories show that some redistributed their working time in favor of a private life without leaving the labor process. So imagine that, you can choose to go from like a 5-day-a-week job, and you go out looking for a job and you find a better job that has a 4-day week, but 10-hour days. And you're happy with that because you get a 3-day weekend, you could spend more time with friends and family. And that's the kind of decision that you saw people making when it goes to like finding a better job, is that they're looking for a job even that allows them to spend more time with friends and family.
Which is why I like UBI a lot and universal healthcare as like a more fundamental solution to these things that people like want to do. I think the second order fixes, like when people talk about let's make it a 4-day work week and let's legislate that, let's raise the minimum income and let's legislate that, or the minimum wage or whatever, and just legislate that. But there's a pressure from UBI by giving people choice that sort of brings those things about to a degree organically. Like people are going to want to work 4 days a week and they can choose it, and companies are going to adapt to that. People aren't going to accept shit wages, so companies are going to adapt to that. Like it actually, by putting power in the hands of the consumers and the labor market and everything, these things can, to a degree at least, start to fix themselves.
Yeah, it's why too, like in the example I just said of going from 5 days to 4 days, like imagine you're working at that job, working 5 days a week, 8 hours, and you get a raise. Great. Like again, you're getting that better money, but that's not going to make you more likely to shift to a 4-day week that you'd rather have in this other job, because it doesn't help you get that other job, whereas basic income does. So that's why, again, there's a difference between like a higher minimum wage or like, you know, unions bargaining for better wages than having that basic income floor. Like it really does have, it's more impactful.
Yeah. It detaches you to that extent from the job. It's like, this is your own personal travels with you power, essentially.
So the next part is we've discussed this actually in an episode, I don't know, like 4 or 5 episodes ago, I don't know, but we went through multiple studies and how each of those studies looked at the impact of trust of basic income. And so here's another one. And again, this goes right into what we concluded, you know, from those other studies, is that on this one, the study found no significant change within 3 years, did not change noticeably in political spectrum or trust in government and institutions compared to the control group. The research indicates this does not mean that there is no effect, but it is possible that such attitude changes require more time, or it's different in government-based income than in a donation-funded experiment. The Finland trial did see more increase in trust. And so this fits into that, where, you know, we seem to find this impact where if there is a publicly funded government-run basic income trial, you should expect to see an increase in trust. Whereas if you have a basic income experiment that is purely charitable and has nothing to do with the government, you most likely aren't going to see a increase in trust.
Well, yeah, you
at
are.
least in government.
You're going to see an increase in trust in whoever's running the experiment.
Right.
Whoever's giving out the money, you trust them more. You're like, oh, cool,
because you're being trusted. Right.
If you handed me $50, I'm not going to be like, oh wow, I'm really happy with the government right now. You know, like.
Yeah. Social attitude, the willingness to participate in society, like volunteering or neighborhood participation, isn't explicitly mentioned as a headline outcome, but the increase in altruistic behavior suggests taking more social responsibility because participants feel economically more secure. They're able to contribute more to the community through donations and direct aid. There was no increase in complacency or apathy. It's important to note the study no negative social effects on social isolation, apathy. People did not withdraw from society to sit on the couch. On the contrary, as you've seen, social contacts increased. Also, procrastination did not decrease or increase. People did not become more lax in their obligations.
It's weirdly worded. I would sort of expect complacency and apathy to decrease, not just not increase. And I'm wondering if they just don't have enough data to say that confidently or not, you know?
Yeah, I think there's probably there was enough where some people it was a decrease, some people it was an increase, and it just wasn't statistically different than the control group based on this. So yeah, all this supports the idea that a basic income does not essentially change people as persons, but gives them the opportunity to act more according to their values. A nice quote from the scientists is, basic income does not change people in the sense that they suddenly have different preferences or attitudes, but it changes their scope for action and thus their behavior. In other words, people remain themselves, but can get more out of themselves.
They get to present the better versions of themselves too. They get to act on it.
Yeah. So yeah, that's all the that's all the top line findings.
Well, we really wonked our way through that.
Yeah, I hope people appreciate having a little bit of extra context for all for all that stuff.
Do we have like a funny video to laugh about to follow that up, or?
Not a funny video, but we've got more results to go through.
One thing I'm wondering about the Germany thing is just how Germany will react. Like this just came out, right? Like in the last couple of days. So
it just came out today, but it was because they're even operating, like 6 hours ahead or whatever it is, then it was more. It came out when we were all asleep, and now it's But today's the first day that the results
It's
are
like
out.
Christmas morning for you, Scott. And you woke up and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, and my thanks to the person who sent me this, where they just translated it all for me and said, "Here, the results are out. This came out." So yeah, that was first thing I did this morning. Was just reading through all these results.
Cool.
Yeah, if you turn on the translation on their website, it actually, you can go through all the charts and everything, and it's pretty. You can see what the actual questions were that they asked, so it's worth doing.
Okay.
Do you want to talk for a second about like how you might see these results being interpreted in the current sort of global context? Like, it is this sort of thing, like right now, I imagine like all of the world is like, what the fuck's going on with our economy? And so if this kind of information, the timing of it is, I don't know, is it good? Is it bad? What do you think?
I've got to say that, yeah, it feels like we're in the midst of like everything falling apart, and I feel that we've kind of mentioned that like every episode we've had,
Sure,
since the election. It's just like it all just seems like it's falling apart, and I just feel it's important to actually realize that there is still good things going on in the world, and that there is something to aim for. And I think that's really important, is that we keep in mind that when it comes to fixing the mess that's going on, that part of this is that we need to keep our eyes on the prize of like how we actually build back better, like, because we can't just go back to the way things were, because the way things were led to this like burning it all down kind of mentality.
But I just mean in Germany, like I don't know much about the overall political climate there, but I imagine like if there's some sense of instability, that people are like, well, what's going on with their money?
Yeah.
The information saying, well, this just came out that says there's a way to sort of stabilize things for people to some degree, but I don't know.
Yeah, and will they notice this?
To me,
will
the
they
timing
care?
seems pretty good in terms of like the good news coming in the face of like you could sort of directly apply it mentally to a current situation, as opposed to just like some nice little experiment that happened and it's like, oh, isn't that cute?
Maybe you could just look this up really quickly, Josh, because I can't really do it. But I know that the German elections either just happened or they're about to happen. So that's one part of this that is a variable in this equation. It's sometimes soon or just happened. I don't remember. But there's I do remember reading.
Looks like it happened in February.
February 23rd.
Was that really? That was the national elections? Was just in? I thought it was coming up. Like maybe.
Looks like the winner was SPD, whatever that is. The Social
There was
Democratic Party of Germany, the AfD, which is sort of
right, because Elon was trying to impact that.
Yeah,
that was they got 10%, and then the CDU is the Union parties, or the Union, center-right, Christian Democratic, and Conservative Political Alliance, got 24. So it looks like this Social Democratic Party edged out the Christian conservatives, and the far right. They had like 10%, so they got beat pretty significantly.
Yeah, when it comes to Germany, it's hard to say, but like polling has consistently shown that there's good support for basic income there, and they like have certain policies that could be converted to looking either like exactly like a basic income or more like a basic income without like too much effort. So I don't know, something like this pilot could kind of jar things loose there to the point where some changes are made.
Oh, I might be reading this wrong. That was the last election. Oh, this is different. Yeah, the AFD went up by 69 seats. The Christian Conservatives went up by 11, and the SPD dropped by 86. And the percentage of the vote was the Christian one won with 28.5. The AFD got 20.8, and then the Social Democrats got 16%. So it's definitely going more in the conservative and far right direction in Germany.
Yeah, although that could change even just with what's going on right now, because it seems to be the case that there's already an impact with like the world turning against the U.S. and Trump and everything that's going on to the point where suddenly there's a reversal where like alt-right parties are like, no, you're friends with Trump, you're out. Like we're not gonna go that way. So that's why in Canada it really looked like the Conservatives were going to win and the next prime minister was going to be a Conservative Party. And instead there's been a massive reversal with very much most likely with Mark Carney winning. Like his support has been like skyrocketing.
This is kind of going back to. Go ahead, Josh.
It's pretty clear, like when you see a study like this, that it's like, well, here's a stabilizing force we could introduce into these weird times right now. Like, if we want to shore up ourselves against the weirdness that's coming out of the U.S., why not turn to some of the studies that we've done and see like that there's an actual a basic income can really provide like a real kind of like backbone for whatever might be coming at us next.
I mean, this is kind of going back to this long-standing idea I've had for a screenplay. This sort of, I guess, reality that the U.S. is kind of boldly going out there and demonstrating what not to do for the world. That's like a service to the rest of the world. Like we're still leading the world in terms of ideas. It's just in terms of like demonstrating what not to do. And I've had this long idea. I don't know if I'll get hunted down for this or whatever, but of a script about Donald Trump where he's actually like a really conscientious lefty sort of people loving guy, and he decided that he wanted to play a character to make his biggest impact and pretend to be like sort of a harsh conservative, whatever, just so that he could provide this service to America and the world of like how absurd everything is. And he keeps being frustrated forever and ever because the more absurd he gets, the more people eat it up, at least in the US. Working title for this screenplay is My Struggle.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's you're really going too far into character when people start dying and like there's he's mass torture and suffering and stuff as a result.
That's why it's so compelling. He's like tortured by this. He's like, but maybe he's from the future and he knows like we really have to like put all this stuff on blast so it doesn't go down this path. Like maybe he knows like if we just keep voting for the DNC, we're gonna get to the worst place. We have to. Anyway, this is not what I actually believe. Please, nobody.
Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to cover, and this is so we were just kind of going along that direction, anyways. So here, do you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so this was a Tumblr post that went viral and has been shared a lot on Twitter and Blue Sky and stuff, and I strongly disagree with this take. So I just wanted to just cover it really quickly and we can just give our takes on this. I'll try to keep this quick, but here's what it says. Hey, look at me. Please leave yourself a note somewhere. You'll see it later that says, it is going to take years, if not decades, to get the United States government to the level of functionality it had in November 2024. If we elect a Democrat in 2028, we are not going to be up and running by 2032. Please make sure you have a reminder in your phone reminding you to not look at 2028, 2032, 2036 Democratic candidates and say, why are they not promising delivering cool shit? because you are going to understand that to get cool shit, we must have competent people running a decently funded government, and we are not going to have that. We are not getting UBI. We are not getting single-payer healthcare. We are not getting free college or free preschool. We are not redistributing wealth on a large scale. We are not getting free internet. We are not getting ranked choice voting. If we are lucky, we are going to get an IRS that can collect taxes, qualified school teachers, research grants, Social Security, and a government that thinks maybe it should be a priority for people around the world to not have AIDS, malaria, or tuberculosis.
Barf. Oh my God.
Terrible, terrible take, I feel.
This was like, hey, ChatGPT, write a manifesto from the perspective of the DNC. Like, it's just, let's do nothing and talk about how bad everything is because it's someone else's fault. Like, let's not be for anything.
Yeah, you can see why it went viral, because you have people strongly agreeing with it and you have people strongly disagreeing with it. And it caused, like, you know, a lot of outrage, or a lot of like, yeah, exactly this. And yeah, I'm on the opposite side, especially, you know, it's saying no UBI. So it even includes UBI as being this thing we can't have. And I just think it's so important to actually make sure that we're driving towards something, that we make something better than what was. Like, absolutely, we cannot just rebuild something the way it was. It's just a terrible thinking to think that that's the way to go.
It's like a level setting of things are always going to be terrible and there's nothing we can do about it. So strap in, you know, like, oh my God. That's just because that's what people know.
Listed in that, so they were all like good things. It was a very nice, concise summary of the kinds of things that we should be asking for as citizens. And so it's like all those things do, if they were just to be done at all, does require a certain amount of disruption in how things are normally done. So like it does require kind of upsetting the ship a little bit. And so while we've got the ship upset, we should be saying, well, here's what we want. Like if you want to upset the ship, then here, listen to what we think is the thing that should replace it. And so yeah. I mean, I'm also just amazed somebody is still on Tumblr, really.
Yeah. Okay, boomer. No. So this maybe makes me want to get back to what someone said in the chat, because like my takeaway is that going out here and presenting these ideas and in this like stymied political and governmental world, and in this like total collapse and ultimate repudiation of basically the way that the DNC and the left has worked for a long time. Someone said, have any of you guys reached out to Patriotic Millionaires Group? Called out Abigail Disney. They just had a ballroom blast the other day, and they seem strong possible UBI allies. And there was a time like I reached out to a ton of them. Like I got some sort of list of their names and numbers, and it was like everyone else in sort of like the philanthropic space. It was just blank stares. It's like, that's not what we do. It's not our mission statement. This is too radical. But I haven't reached out to any of them in a while, but I am noticing in the philanthropic spaces, like a lot of these, especially as it comes more and more from tech money, which are like, they're not like old money thinking. They're more like big swings, we can change the world type thinkers, that more and more people that are in even other spaces like food security and health and whatever are becoming more and more open to radical ideas. Like their eyes get open wide when you talk about, you know, are your food banks really working? What if we got people cash? Like, what if we did cash as preventative medicine for health outcomes? What, you know, and more people are like ready to try something wild, you know, like something like that is outside of the bubble of like, let's buckle down and tighten the belt. So yeah, I think that take is absolutely wrong, because it's really important to strike while the energy is there, and the energy is never going to be there more than when what we've been doing forever is collapsing in our faces. We can't double down on like the crap that we've been doing when it's in the middle of free fall.
Yeah, and I also think there's an argument too where, you know, I would never have suggested eliminating, you know, 100 programs and then at some point coming up with basic income. You know, like I would only say that we should have done universal basic income, and then look at the existing programs we have to see if, which ones you need to keep and which we can get rid of. But because we're in this environment where we've gotten rid of so much stuff, I think it's that much more important to make sure that we immediately get out this universal floor, and then we can figure out, okay, which programs do we need to bring back and what do those programs look like? And we can take time figuring that out. Whereas if we don't have UBI as that floor, then we're taking time to figure things out, or we're trying to get back stuff that that have all these problems. And then people are still, falling down to the ground in poverty. So it just becomes that much more important that we can immediately get a basic income floor out, just as we did immediately do with the child tax credit in 2021. That immediately dropped child poverty by 40%. Right. We know how to do that quickly, and I think we need to.
Yeah, it's very painful, but it's also a big opportunity. Like all the metaphors, like when the pendulum swings really far one way, it can swing back really far the other way, or when someone throws a punch, it opens them up to land another one. Like there's so many reasons that this is actually the moment we could do something that grows virally. I mean, you see AOC and Bernie going out with similar like universal healthcare type messages in this moment particularly, and getting like 4,000 people out of a town of 10,000 to show up at a rally. Like there's a real energy that can be cultivated now, because this exactly is the moment. The whole wet blanket, like let's wait 20 years before even imagining we can do something again, is the worst possible take.
Yeah, it's not like the strategy should not be like, let's wait till all of this presidency takes place and then start coming up with, okay, the plan should not be like, look around at the damage and then start rebuilding stuff. It should be like, start making the plan for rebuilding like right now.
Yeah.
So the next thing that I wanted to cover was this ties into the patriotic millionaires question, and it ties into the excitement around pilots and what energy there is and stuff. And so I wanted to make sure that everyone knows that Jeff Atwood published this blog just recently, and it's called "The Road Not Taken is Guaranteed Minimum Income." And so Jeff Atwood is the co-founder of Stack Exchange, and this blog post gets into his thinking about basic income. He likes calling it guaranteed minimum income. And the big news here that you get to at the bottom of this is that he's putting $50 million of his family wealth, which is half of his family wealth, into some big pilots in rural U.S. So this is going to be in Mercer County, West Virginia, and Beaufort County, North Carolina. It's where his like mom and dad are both from, and then there's going to be a third area too. But this is going to be a huge rural pilot, and so that's one of the things that we haven't seen really in the U.S. so far. Like we've seen all these pilots in like the cities. But we have not seen really the rural pilot. Sam Altman had some rural participants in that pilot, but this can be potentially more community wide. Like you can get like a whole, county and make sure like a significant percentage of that county actually gets the basic income.
I think the Ulster County one tried to be more rural than anything too, but it wasn't at this scale. And I mean, it's important to have this sort of diversity to sort of disarm the whole like, well, why are they getting it, not us? I mean, this is why we promote universalism in general. But if you have a diversity across all these different pilots of these different types of things, we can stitch that data together and be like, look how well that works for all these different groups. Why don't we do it for everybody? And coincidentally, the reason why for Bootstraps, we picked people from all walks of life, from rural North Carolina to, Manhattan,
Well, I just wanted to point out the amounts too. So it's $1,500 per month for a year and a half. Will be the amounts going to these pilot participants in the rural areas.
Assuming it's like at a household level or what?
I would assume that.
1,500 is pretty significant. Like that's definitely a big step up from. I mean, it's usually 500. So, and a year and a half is pretty long. I think that's going to be some pretty sizable data that comes out of that.
Yeah. Oh, and the number of people. Sorry, I didn't say that either. It'll be 1,800 people across those counties. And again, there's a third county that will be involved, but it's as yet undetermined. And the distribution will be by GiveDirectly, and the research will be by open research, just like Sam Altman's pilot. So this is a big deal, and it was great to see. Oh, and also they're hoping to involve a lot of veterans in these pilots too, and that's like another thing I wanted to see. I think that when we're looking at the various like specific groups that can be targeted to see what the impact of basic income would be on these specific groups. You can pick groups that leave yourselves open to attack, and that's actually another news piece we can talk about next. But also, if you do like veterans, you're not going to see that. That's a pretty safe group. Republicans are not going to sue to try to prevent that from happening.
Pacifists are going to sue.
Right. So then here's some news along those lines. Is that the basic income program benefiting Black and Native Americans has been challenged in a lawsuit, and this is in California. So you're not going to be able to pass a law in California to ban basic income pilots. It would never work. But what you can do is sue for like discrimination and saying that it's illegal to target specific groups like this, and that's what they're doing. So it's possible that this pilot, because it focused on Black people and Native Americans, that program might be shut down.
That's part of the trend going on, and that's kind of like what we when we get Commingle up and running. These are obvious candidates to go to and say, beyond like our national model, would you like to go ahead and do your local pilot with a more universalist mechanism that will still include all of the same people? Like, can we get around these hurdles to what is largely really good work, and just sort of remove some of the pitfalls of targeting?
Yeah, so I mean, the strategy of going, if it's a strategy or what, but the idea of running pilots in like rural, more white areas is probably like it's a good thing to have. I mean, the people there are hurting too, so it is in terms of like the current political climate and what is going to help move the needle for UBI. Like, yeah, maybe that's the way to do it, right? Like, as sad as that is, like, but it's still going to help people, and it's going to help people that people kind of want to pay attention to.
Yeah, and also as long as it's charitable versus anyway like publicly funded or whatever is the difference in these conservative areas too.
I mean, I think it's incredibly important to make people in different areas, different walks of life, different political beliefs, in any way we can, start to feel like they share common bonds with the people that right now we're so tribally opposed to. So I would love to run a pilot like in rural bordering city and left versus bordering right, and then put them all in the same pool. And just
it's
just
hard
kind
for
of
people
like,
to see that the common bond is that everybody's broke, but everybody needs some more money. Right
everybody's
now.
broke. Everyone needs money, and we can all support each other. There's a way. It's not zero sum. It's not us versus them, or it doesn't have to be. That's what it is, and it's not working.
All right, a couple other. We're running out of time, so I might try to get through these quickly. But so this just came out recently, just the other day. So New York City is voting for a new mayor, And one of the candidates, Adrian Adams, is talking about a guaranteed basic income plan for homeless families. And it would actually be very large. It would be, the title here in the New York Times piece, New York City mayor candidate pitches largest guaranteed income program in the U.S. And this is looking at 3 different demographics. In total, it would be 21,000 homeless people. It would be 15,000 homeless kids who are 5 years older or younger, 6,000 unaccompanied homeless youth who are ages 18 to 24, and 500 young adults who exit the foster system on each year, and would provide an initial 2,500 right off the bat, and then it'd be followed by monthly payments over 3 years that start at $1,000 per month and then fall to $500 per month.
This is both exciting and saddening. It's like, what about the people who are about to fall into homelessness and they're getting nothing?
Right. You're not going to help people. Yeah. You're not preventing homelessness. You're just treating it, which is
more of that like
the issue.
Unnecessary paternalistic thing that's going to like actually exacerbate part of the problem while helping it to a degree on the like after the fact. It was interesting. Her name is Adrian Adams because I'm like, is she related to Eric Adams? And I looked it up, and they went to high school together, but they're not related.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I don't know if that's going to help or hurt her, where like name recognition is Adams, and maybe people think that they're related, but she's better or something, or maybe it'll be like, I'm not voting for Adams at all,
Yeah, I don't think Adams is a good name recognition. Yeah. I met a guy the other day whose last name was Führer. He's a really nice guy, but it was spelled just like the German dictator,
Right.
I was like, that's unfortunate. You should get a stage name or something.
Okay, so this is a similar thing, even to what that was, and this is Rashida Tlaib calls for cash payments to young people experiencing homelessness. This is called the Youth Homelessness Guaranteed Income Pilot Program Act, and it provide $1,400 per month for 3 years. So again, this would be a federal program. So this is not just New York. This would be covering everybody. If it passed, and of course it's not going to pass, but if it passed, then it would be $1,400 per month to young adults experiencing homelessness. And also this particular one would be $1,400 or the adjusted fair market rent, which I don't agree with that policy detail. If $3,000, if some people get $3,000 per month and others get $1,400 per month, and they're living in like a super expensive area like New York, like that's where you're subsidizing landlords. Like landlords are asking for that much, and then they get it because this policy says you can crank it up for landlords who are asking for a lot of money.
Yeah, man, I'm actually kind of worried about both of these. Like, this is a weird set of incentives too. It's like, looking forward to getting evicted because then I'll get effectively $40,000 over the next 3 years, for being homeless for a short amount of time. It's just it's so much cheaper to prevent homelessness than, you still got to lift people out of it, but prevention is way more effective than, mitigation and cure.
It's so much more. You got to do both. Like you've got to have that money up front that's always there to prevent it. And then if that doesn't work and people still fall into it, then it's easier for them to get out. And other programs also can help people too. But you've got to make sure that you're preventing. And also unconditionally, like helping people out there.
It feels like one of those job maintenance things where like people in the foundation, like low key, might not actually want to solve the problem because that's what they do, is they fight the problem. So this sort of program won't eradicate homelessness. It'll just constantly like beat it back, as much as it can. But the thing that they say, we want to eradicate homelessness, it's like you can't eradicate homelessness until you prevent it, because it'll just keep coming.
Yeah. And so the next piece, this is another pilot program that the results are out, and this was a large one too. At the time, I think this was the largest. So this was Cook County in Illinois, provided 3,000 people $500 per month. It was called the Cook County Promise, and they're touting the results. The funds are mostly used on food, rent, utilities, transportation. According to preliminary survey results, people said the infusion of money helped reduce stress and help them feel more financially secure. The county is now forming an advisory committee to figure out what's next for the program. So Preckwinkle is led this, and she's now trying to make this program like permanent. This was $42 million went through here as part of ARPA, I believe it was.
So how do you make it permanent? Are they like, is it still going to be at the scale of like 3,000 randomly elected people, or is it going to be at the scale of the?
Good question.
Like everybody?
Like I suppose that's something that's going to come out of what the advisory committee, being, do you keep it like this size? Do you scale it up to larger? Where does funding come from? Are you taxing to do this? That kind of stuff. That's
kind of the trend I've seen in all of these guaranteed income pilots and programs. That's the targeted ones where it's like, that the Cards Against Humanity thing where it's like step 1 blank, step 2 blank, step 3 profit. It's like step 1, run a basic income pilot. Step 2, question mark. Step 3, scale it up. It's like They actually haven't answered the question. They just have expressed a desire, but the basic premise of the way they're setting up these pilots and programs is like, seems to me to be fundamentally unscalable. And so like they're sort of putting it off to the point it's like, well, we're going to get such great data out of this that it's obviously going to catch fire, or like we're going to raise more money, but even if they scaled it up 10 times, they'd still be servicing for a temporary amount of time a small percentage of the population. Like there's no actual like plan seemingly to like turn it into a real policy rather than like a temporary demonstration.
Yeah.
Got to get you on this advisory committee, kind of. Whatever that is.
They'll be so sick of me. They're actually like, don't let them know our email address. Get them off the thread.
Yeah. So a couple things from this. I liked how at one point, roughly 94% of participants said they had used the money to manage a financial emergency or unexpected expense. So, we know how few people have that ability. And so, during that time of receiving this, that, a lot of people found that to be really useful in that regard. And, the total results aren't out yet. So, I'm just going off of this. University of Chicago is evaluating the program, and the findings will be out later this year. But Give Directly showed that 45% of people said that they were able to avoid debt, while another 31% said they reduced their debt. More than 300 participants in the program used financial counseling, and almost 60% who worked the nonprofit working credit for at least a year increased their credit score on average nearly 40 points, according to the county. So those are just some findings from this, and it's just good to see that they're pushing for this to be scaled up or whatever.
Yeah.
But so the next thing is pretty cool. Again, I doubt this will go anywhere, but I just love seeing it. This is in Tennessee, and so there's a bill in both the House and Senate called the Guaranteed Basic Income Act, or the Protection Against Automation Act, which requires Tennessee to develop and implement a program in which eligible residents are awarded an annual guaranteed basic income beginning next year. And so this is like working its way through. The amount is, it's smallish, but that's like Alaska size kind of, like the bigger Alaska ones. This is $3,000 per year, paid monthly or semi-monthly. So, it's kind of even
said what the eligibility rules will be. They're just saying there will be some eligibility.
It seems that, yeah, I read this. It looks like, so they need to be at least 18, so it's adults, and possesses a valid driver's license and is a full-time resident, or was a full-time resident the previous year. This looks very much like Alaska. It looks inspired by Alaska. And also, it requires you to apply each year. So again, Alaska works the same way. Here you would need to apply to receive the grant, but it looks like it would be fully universal. Like if you want the grant, then you would get it if you applied for it and met those requirements.
You apply for it each year. That's a little weird. But
yeah, again, similar to Alaska.
But they don't have to keep applying, do they? They just
no. Every year you apply for the grant. It's because you do have to approve that you are were a resident in the previous year.
Is it just like a line you fill out in your state taxes or something? Like, yes, I would like it.
Or... No, like you go to the website and it's just a thing you do each year, and it's not like burdensome, or really anything. I would think the Oregon
you're registering to receive it.
Right.
Applying means that there's a chance of being turned down. So if there is a chance of being turned down, it would be I'd be curious to know what that is.
I guess it helps.
It's a good idea.
I guess it helps with running the thing. Like if someone leaves the state,
right?
You don't want to just be automatically giving it to them.
Yeah, or if you're outside of the state for too long, and then so you don't qualify as a resident, maybe you're a resident in some other state or whatever. Like it makes sense to do this kind of thing. I wouldn't say that it's not doesn't qualify as a basic income because you have to put your name in a box and show that you haven't or that you're over 18 and that you're a resident. That's minimum stuff.
Yeah, I guess they don't want someone with like, if 10 states are doing this, someone has like 10 pied-à-terre houses and they're collecting from each one.
I guess we can end with this next one. I just really appreciated this. And so this is from Vivian Wilson. And she's Elon Musk's daughter. His trans daughter that he feels is like dead to him, and she did this great interview with Vogue magazine, the youth version, and she had this great quote in her interview. So I just wanted to share this one quote because I don't know, it just resonated with me. She said, "I'm a leftist, not a Marxist. I describe myself with the things that I personally believe in and the things that I feel are pretty common sense. If you think about it for more than 2 seconds, I believe in universal basic income. I believe in free healthcare. I believe food, shelter, and water are human rights. I believe that wealth inequality is one of the biggest problems in the United States right now, especially of our generation. I feel like workers should be fairly compensated for the work that they do. And I don't feel like wealth should be hoarded by these mega billionaires who are the top 1% who only have their own interests at heart. I've met some of these billionaires. They're not very good people. I don't think any of them are."
Yeah. I wonder who that's aimed at. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure and share that because also I feel that she clearly likes the idea of universal basic income, feels that it's like a human right that's currently not being met, and feels that the wealthy should be taxed as part of this. And then you've got her dad who says that he supports UBI, but then also more recently says that he only supports UBI, not now, but only after AGI is developed and is sufficiently capable of eliminating millions of jobs. So not until then. And then now he's like in this department that he created, Doge, that's supposed to all be about government efficiency, and he's deleting all of these programs and hasn't said a word about UBI the whole time as being something that the government could do that would be much more efficient than all this stuff. Instead, he's just like, burning it all down. And
we're going to have to feel some pain, everybody, which to him means what? I don't know.
Yeah. And he said that empathy is a weakness, and it's like, do you really support UBI if you believe that empathy is a weakness and that you don't support it until tens of millions of people are jobless?
Also, empathy is the greatest strength in human history, like our ability to understand each other and have stories. And like, we can have nation states without empathy. You have to be able to relate to other people.
Yeah. There's something else that she said too, and it wasn't in that interview, but she said it in a different interview where she was asked about how Elon wants to go to Mars, and she laughed about it and said that that's it's just a marketing gimmick. He said that he wants to go to Mars because he feels that like feeds into this what he's selling himself as is like this genius visionary person, and that really helps people like get excited about these ideas. And does he actually want to go to Mars? Just like, does he actually support universal basic income? I feel it's the same kind of thing where I think he said he supports basic income because that fed into this idea that he's forward thinking and that like he's thinking about technology and wants these things to happen. But I just get more and more the feeling after watching what he's been doing and what he's been saying that he's just full of shit when it comes to his support for basic income. And like, I'm not even, I think that she's right as far as like, does he really want to go to Mars, or is he using that to become a trillionaire? I think that's probably more what he's doing, like,
I mean, even a generous take is like, maybe he used to, like, maybe he did do all these things for idealistic reasons, but he's sort of like lost that, and it is now no longer like more than like the self-serving
I think the amount
ego
that
thing.
we're seeing the father-child relationship quarrel play out in the like global economy is insane. Like, I think the amount that that relationship has impacted how he sees the world and thinks we need to fix the world is enormous. And like, I think like a story that just focuses on that relationship tells the story of like the last 3 years and probably the next 5.
And it impacts like they have so much power that like their family dynamic and struggles like it makes its way
we all
deeply into our legislation and our realities. Someone in the chat said Strat Hobbies and Knickknacks said we should get her on as a guest, so let's work on that.
That would be great.
That'd be fun.
That'd be great. I don't think we have the weight of doing that, but maybe if she likes basic income enough that she would.
I mean, I like that in the brackets was universal basic income, which I'm assuming she said UBI, which is different than what a lot of people are saying when they come to it more recently. They're saying guaranteed minimum income or whatever, like the language that has sort of usurped UBI in terms of like national discourse. So she's like she's talking about this just by the words of it, something that I more relate to.
Yeah, if you talk about UBI as a human right, I think you're really talking about universality and unconditionality. Like if you can't talk about it as a human right if you're like, well, not everybody should get it.
It's a human right for these certain people that I think deserve it. Like,
we would define
that implies no one else is human.
All right, we're at the end here. I guess we'll go ahead and finish it up. Thank you everybody for listening today. Hope you enjoyed, especially going through the German pilot results. And I'll put those links in the description for the edited version. Thanks for everyone for listening live, and for those who are listening later, with the edited version, please remember to like and subscribe, leave a comment, and share with others so that they can learn more about basic income and learn more about what's going on around the world. Also, I guess I feel like we've done this before in a previous ending for a video too, but like again, like stay strong. Like I know it feels like the world is collapsing around us, and to a degree it kind of is, but like just like, yeah, you got to latch on to something, try to see like the light, try to think positively, try to think about how things could be instead of how they are. And I don't know, just fight for that better version of the world.
Don't listen to that fucking quote from that person earlier. Right. Like, this is the moment to build, and psychologically, it'll keep you going and uplift you to have something to fight for, to build for, rather than let's just buckle up and hold on and just resist or whatever. Like, let's actually do something. Like, this is the time.
Yeah,
I keep thinking back to that the video that we watched a couple episodes ago about the guy that his comment was just like, give me a universal basic income, give me universal health care. Like, that's, if you have just that message, if that's the focus, I think we're good.
Don't get distracted.
Get distracted. Everything else is a distraction.
You need universal health care.
I mean, wolf cuts are cool and all.
Yeah.
That's right, the wolf cut. Yeah. All right, you guys.
All right. Yep. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time.